Here in Sri Lanka, you cannot talk about mental illnesses without talking about Angoda. And even though the facilities at Angoda offer invaluable services, it has unfortunately acquired a notorious reputation. You can almost never bring up the name without hearing a giggle or an insensitive remark. And that is mainly because mental illnesses have for so long and are still so often portrayed as a crazy state of mind. In this segment, we thought we'd bring you an excerpt from a special series that the Charlie Rose Show on America's PBS station did earlier this year called the Brain Series. In this episode on depression, we'll see how mental illnesses are not just a state of mind, but are very real biological and more so neurological problems.
Could actually literally say, when you're depressed, what areas of the brain aren't working properly. Take a very simple-minded point of view.
This is really a wonderful point because many people don't appreciate this. But one of the ways pathologists distinguish between psychiatric and neurological illnesses in, let's say, 1890, 1900, is they would take patients who died of neurological illness or psychiatric, they would cut the brains. If they saw a large hole in it, they knew it was a neurological disease, because most neurological diseases cause significant localized anatomical changes.
That was the old joke, actually.
That's right.
You know, if you could cut it and see it, it was neurology. If you could treat it, it was psychiatry.
Also, if you didn't see it, you cut the brain and you didn't see anything obvious, because as we now learn, these are more subtle changes, then it was a psychiatric disorder. And it wasn't until functional imaging came along, and this is why Helen's works was so extraordinary, that you could really define a neural circuit involved in a disorder by using imaging.
I mean, it's really remarkable. You know, Freud, Wernicke, Alzheimer's, everyone knew these were brain disorders.
Yes.
They were all cutting brains way back. They just couldn't find anything and needed other theories to actually accommodate what they knew to be true. And this is the remarkable issue about the time we live in. We now have tools that allow us to test what we know to be true.
Freud knew that all of the things he was dealing with had a biological basis, and he tried to develop a model to explain them, and it was trivial. He didn't publish it in his lifetime. But he realized someday biology would come along and give you an insight into it.
So what people discovered was that it wasn't just one area of the brain. Just like the syndrome has problems with different symptoms, that there were multiple areas of the brains that weren't functioning normally. Some areas were overactive, some areas were underactive, different combinations in different patients. But there started to be a pattern, and there started to be the nodes in what would become a putative network that was involved in major depression. What are the big areas? The ringleader, as the data has evolved over time, is this area 25. It's the subcallosal cingulate. It's an area deep in the frontal lobe, and it seems to always show itself whenever there's an intense negative experience. Area 25 is the negative mood regulator, but it's also associated with areas like the amygdala, the prime hub for mediating all stress responses, all novel
emotional responses.
Emotional responses, actually anything novel gets processed originally through the amygdala, and the amygdala and Area 25 have an intimate relationship with one another. Other areas that are important regulate drives, like the hypothalamus. This is the core. Many nuclei are involved in sleep, appetite, libido. Again, a direct link between Area 25 and the hypothalamus and the amygdala. The hippocampus, where memory, context is there. And when one thinks about what happens when an event happens in your environment, it's immediately processed by the amygdala. Area 25 and the amygdala have a discussion about it. The hippocampus comes online to kind of say, is this familiar? Have I been there before? To provide context. And a whole cascade of events will go on to respond to those stimuli. Not thought about by your prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain that really at the end of the day will have to synthesize all the information and decide what you're going to do about it. And it is this crosstalk between these various areas, this choreography, if you will, which is how emotion and thinking help us to plan our day and respond to the world around us in a functional and healthy way. hypothalamus. This is the core. Many nuclei are involved in sleep, appetite, libido. Again, a direct link between Area 25 and the hypothalamus and the amygdala. The hippocampus, where memory, context is there. And when one thinks about what happens when a event happens in your environment, it's immediately processed by the amygdala. Area 25 and the amygdala have a discussion about it. The hippocampus comes online to kind of say, is this familiar? Have I been there before? To provide context. And a whole cascade of events will go on to respond to those stimuli. Not thought about by your prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain that really at the end of the day will have to synthesize all the information and decide what you're going to do about it. And it is this crosstalk between these various areas, this choreography, if you will, which is how emotion and thinking help us to plan our day and respond to the world around us in a functional and healthy way.
If you want to see more of that discussion on depression, you can find it on YouTube. Search for Brain Series.
On to the world around us in a functional and healthy way.
If you want to see more of that discussion on depression, you can find it on YouTube. Search for Brain Series 2. In the second part of our interview tonight with Sean Humphreys, we discuss how to deal with loved ones who might be affected by depression. How can you tell if someone is undergoing depression, and how can you help them, particularly if you're a parent with young children? Now, you spoke about symptoms or signs of depression. It seems to me that some of the things that you mentioned, like sleeplessness or being tired all the time or a loss of appetite and things like that, it could be mistaken for other, just general fatigue or maybe, things like that. It's not like having another disease where you can really physically see symptoms. So then how can we, sort of be sensitive, to our colleagues, maybe to our family members? I mean, is there anything else that we can sort of keep in mind to identify if people are having problems with depression?
Right, and you're right, it is a tricky thing. The symptoms are not always, they're never really black and white. It's never an easy thing to diagnose something like depression. So, and especially for a family member, when you're close to them or a friend, there's other things mixed up with that as well as in the relationship and the things that are happening on the day-to-day. So just a simple thing, just a very simple thing is just being open to listen to the person and to pick up any clues that if they are talking about things like, an extreme example, something about harming themselves or suicide, those types of issues, those are huge red flags, and that's when you know the person needs help. Also, just the prolongedness of time, just how long the person is feeling down and tired and not sleeping. That's an issue as well. If it's just once in a while, then likely not an issue. But if you're noticing it's for a month at a time or longer, then again that's a sign that something needs to be done, and you need to kind of take it to a professional or someone else. But most of the times, most things when you're dealing with mental health, the best medicine really is just talking. So as a friend, as a family member, just being open to a loved one and sharing with them what you're feeling, what you're thinking, the stresses of your day, that can be a big help. And so most times, that's the way to go about it.
But how do you approach somebody? Say, for example, you can see, that this person is struggling.
Right.
Perhaps it's a colleague when you're not, don't have a family connection, maybe. I mean, how do you approach? It seems like a very sort of sensitive and uncomfortable, maybe, situation to go and approach somebody and say, do you want to talk about a problem, or how do you do that?
Right. There's again no easy way, and because the relationships you have are always different, some people you may not be able to speak with, and then if you are very concerned with them, then maybe you go and can speak with a family member or someone that they care about that might be able to approach them. I don't think you should ever force yourself on someone on an issue like this. Because mental health is such a sensitive topic, and because where we are in talking with it, kind of in society in general, it's one of those things that you do have to be careful with. and you really have to judge, I think, the relationship you have with that person. And if you're not comfortable, then it's likely the sign that you shouldn't. But if you are concerned, to seek someone else that can help them and going about it a different way. But there is no magic bullet, and I think the more we talk about these issues, the easier it will be, I think, to discuss things like mental health with kind of everyone. And that's the goal, I think, of this is things like World Mental Health Day is to be able to speak about mental health more openly, like we would, again, like a physical ailment or something where you always would tell somebody if you had something like diabetes or you know, if you had cancer or something. That's something you would tell everyone, colleagues, family members, and so that's the point we need to get to, I think. However, we're not there yet. I think that's a good point, and so that sensitivity needs to be there.
Slightly on a different line, I was just wondering if you might know, with regards to maybe depression or mental health in general, is it different the way it affects men and women? Does it affect one group more than others? And if so, what are some of the factors for the reasons?
Yeah, well, things like depression seem to, the statistics show that it affects women more than men. Again, I think that likely relates to the fact that women are more likely to talk about their feelings than men are. And so the actual statistics of depression probably are about 50-50. It's just a matter of the ones that we're finding in the world, and the ones that are being reported are more often women, just because it's more culturally acceptable, more societally acceptable for women to talk about their feelings. And so if they are depressed, that will come out faster and more easily.
Sorry to interrupt you, but do you find that's true in these particular cultures as well? Because I would tend to think that women have a bigger pressure to sort of hold it back and not show even more vulnerability, you know, and to say that I have something wrong with me.